So I only have those two notes because high C is in a shipping box with a handle on it in my car. I haven't really unpacked from my tour yet because I'm not sure if Cornu is done traveling around or not. Right now I'm in Longmont, Colorado, and my name is Michael Miller. This is a Michael Miller trademark training video out to you because you're watching. Thank you and welcome. It's meant for Michael Miller Pilates licensed affiliates, the Cornu Corps, and anyone interested in surviving and thriving as a Pilates instructor. Now, of course, that means within this point of view, not totally literally across the board. My broadcast brings you two things that I would want you to walk away from, knowing that I tried to point to two things. One is Cornu tension, which is the way the body moves through space, and the other is an ideal point of view of Pilates. Just one point of view based on an ideal that comes from a theory that that ideal exists within Joe's original work, right? Right out of his book. MMP is a point of view of Pilates. There are thousands upon thousands. MMP as a point of view can be explained as an ideal look at Pilates based on what's in Joe's book. That's as far as it goes. And yet it might go far enough. So, when I make a broadcast yesterday, I'd been away on tour. I came back with inner pressure to write fiction, and in coming back, okay, bear with me. I was even more scatterbrained yesterday, and yet in YouTube it didn't really record because I used the new phone I'm trying to transition to instead of this phone that is successfully set up to make a YouTube broadcast. So what I have to report to you, if you've been watching, that in doing YouTube, I left YouTube and Facebook on a weekday basis and tried to move to Patreon, which is a place where patrons can pledge you support at different tiers, which seems way fascinating and an interesting structure. But you have to jump through hoops and pay more money to stream live through that platform than just being here on YouTube. So I encourage you to get your own Patreon account to allow patrons into your life for anything that you might put out there at different, I do this a lot for the presentation, but at different tiers, at different price points. You give and they get for some reason of that tier. Okay, so, all right. So, if this is your first time watching, welcome. And my name is Michael Miller, and my number one thing on the, is welcome to the carousel. Now, a carousel, as you watch it, moves from left to right, and a merry-go-round, as you watch it from the outside, I'm saying, as you watch it go around, a merry-go-round appears from right to left. Okay, and because I speak English and my English runs from left to right, my language runs from left to right, I encourage the use of a carousel image in making the best effort to understand the most of what I have to say in the least amount of time. Because as an instructor, you don't get somewhere until really, for me, in my opinion, the student finds some familiarity in what they're doing, So, and from that familiarity, be in a position to exercise more control. You know what I'm saying? And so, a long time ago, research out of the Southern Cal talks about spaced repetition. You know, you have to read something, put it down, and then come back to it, and read something and put it down. So there has to be space in between the exposures. Spaced repetition. And some of that is the merry-go-round, by the nature that everything's in motion and things just go by, and you can't freeze what you don't get until you get it, because it just goes by. There can be so much attention and interest and passion for what you're about to say that people, students, don't want to miss anything. So they're very attentive and like want to grab the meaning in the moment with talons, like an eagle would take its prey out of the water kind of thing. And yet when you let them know that there'll be plenty of time to make the grab and that you'll see it go by at least 3 times, the whole energy in the room relaxes or takes on a different air because there's not an expectation to catch it all on the first time by. Now I'm talking about the carousel because I was actually thinking of delivering my explanation of Pilates via the carousel, but it's not the most active, ready, at hand, in mind presentation that I've been working on for myself and hoping to interest others in, of which there hasn't been any. But this is my opportunity to give you this presentation of 5 things, and I portray it as here you are in the valley, and you pay a fee to go up the gondola to get a point of view, right? And then get to come back down again. It's just a point of view. And because every human being creates their own simulation of what reality is like out there, whether it's anything real or not, it's individualized in how the human being absorbs its information in order to respond to the situation it finds itself in. Whether it's reality or not, just some means of response. Okay, so I brought up the carousel, and for me, I stand here pointing to a carousel in motion, so moving from your left to your right in your mind. The carousel is moving left to right. Or if you write in the opposite direction, then imagine it going the other way. What matters in this carousel is that it's round, and what's on it doesn't change, even though your exposure to it lasts and then it disappears. So if you got those claws out wanting to understand, you get dragged around to where you do or don't gain an understanding of it without losing your grip and perhaps making too much effort. Once you know that, what I have to say is an explanation of a carousel that's going by, and fundamentally for me, that carousel, or the explanation of the word Pilates, starts with a person's name, Joseph Pilates. Right? And then from there, you get to his method, and that method makes a statement all on its own. That MMP as one point of view out of thousands takes its meaning from Joe's definition, Joe's promise, and Joe's sequence. So those are three things. If you want to explain MMP to someone, meaning Michael Miller's point of view of Pilates, it's these 5 things that you work through, and the first 3 are straight from Joe. And probably you know his definition. Contrology is complete coordination of body, mind, and spirit. The very next paragraph, his statement, contrology develops the body uniformly, comma, and then more stuff, but most importantly, contrology develops the body uniformly, most importantly from just the MMP point of view, because that's where the whole notion of Pilates being a whole body exercise comes from or is based in. Or to me, when anyone talks about whole body and Pilates is a whole body exercise, well, and you could say, well, why is that? And I think this is a better way. First of all, I think is an interesting stance. But it goes too fast. From Joseph Pilates, really, it goes to Joseph Pilates was a survivor. And I've had people say, Michael, he was German before he was a survivor, but he was a survivor, right? And this is a point of view. MMP's point of view is that Pilates is an ideal that you can get to right out of Joe's book that is sensational, that you can feel. So number 1 was survival, and I've made the point, or just hopefully made the point, that when it comes to Pilates, Pilates is about survival. And to me, the purest of terms, the most basic terms, it's about reality and the biology and the physics in which it seeks to survive. So MMP is a point of view of Pilates that tries to make a reasoned explanation of Pilates within the realm of biology and physics. And there's much more that you can make of Pilates that has nothing to do with or is only tangentially associated with biology or physics. But MMP is a point of view about Pilates that is sensational, that you can feel it, and that it comes from a coordination of being, thinking, and observing. So as a presenter, when you're talking about number 1 and Joe's definition, and the more you go through the first 3 in terms of making familiarity with what people already know about Pilates, his sequence of hundreds, roll up, roll over, leg circles, rolling like a ball, 1 leg stretch, 2 leg stretch, spine. So either Joe's 34 or some contemporized or creatively altered variation of your own, but it's Joe's sequence that's in the book, and that's any meaning derived about Pilates in an ideal way comes from either his definition, his statement about the means or how it's done, meaning uniformly develops, and the sequence itself, which acts as the grammar and the insight to why it is what it is and how to teach it as an instructor, because you understand it for the ideal that exists within it. So yesterday's comment about, oh, didn't make it here to Facebook, to YouTube. I'm on YouTube. Evidently I didn't record on YouTube because that was the new phone and this is my old phone. So I hope you get to hear this. And my title on Facebook was Two Monumental Identifications, talking about CT and MMP, all modesty aside. And it's saying that maybe it's only 1.5 because I see in others the germination of their own ideation of Pilates beyond whatever whatever weave they exist in within the tapestry. And to me, it's human nature, and just look at human nature and how it tends to idealize reality and vice versa. Number 3, in terms of why am I listening to this, or why does this matter? The question is, on a joyride? That's the title. On a joyride. So as a Pilates instructor, is this a joyride? And it's mostly all about you and however you find satisfaction and fulfillment in what you're doing relative to Pilates. And the whole chorus just stood up and is shouting, so please sit back down and let me go on. To me, one way of looking at whether or not it's a joyride or not is whether or not the student, because I'm mostly talking about being a teacher and teaching Pilates, whether or not a student is in pain. There's a threshold of identification, even though it has a spectrum of interpretation and reality, and it's pain can be many things, but because you can say, no, I'm not in pain, it's different than I'm in pain and I want out. It's like jail, right? So, to the extent that it's not a joyride, then efficient and effective are in my notes about this title. You know, when it matters because the doors will always be crowded with those seeking to escape the pain that they're in, and all I care about is Pilates, and Pilates in and of itself has an essence of its own that can be included in whatever, but it's in the pursuit of Pilates that so much of everything else dissolves and disappears. Wait, the lovely student sitting on the Cadillac with the roll down bar. And I say, okay. She got there and sat down, and based on how she managed that, I says, roll down. And she says, wait, don't you want to hear my history? And so it mattered to her, and of course I want to hear your history. And literally 10 minutes rolled by of the 55 that I have to be an instructor. And yet, because it mattered to her, and all that she told me helped my knowing and my mind know more about her background, what did I say to her? I said, roll down. Because it's not until, for me as an instructor, I see movement that I have anywhere to go with it, because Pilates in one word is exercise, and in 2 words it's corrective exercise, and so there's nothing for me to do as an instructor participating in that corrective loop until I see movement in which to participate in. No matter how much knowing there is. You really have to be careful, always. Always. So that's why it's not a joyride, because people really want to get out of pain as efficiently and effectively as possible. And the whole thing with Pilates is not about letting Pilates be dragged toward the issue, but the accomplishment of the state of being in the body be a resolution of the issue. So number 4 is just titled Inconvenient Truth. There's a lot of different books and references to that subject, but to me the inconvenient truth about Pilates is that it has an essence of its own. And the more you look, the more apparent it is. And if that's true, then those wanting to be more effective instructors will at least add to what they already know and have intuition about. Their whole heritage and lineage doesn't have to be deserted merely by knowing there's more to know. From at least the MMP point of view. So number 5 was the carousel and the presentation. And so Joe's definition, contrology is complete coordination of body, mind, and spirit, right? In MMP, as a point of view, contrology is complete coordination. Contrology is complete coordination of being, thinking, and observing. So body, mind, and spirit within the MMP point of view is being, thinking, and observing. Which, for reasons maybe we'll describe later, because it's a complete coordination of those 3 capacities that exist as present tense continuous, because observing certainly has to, and being certainly has to, or you'd be dead, and thinking certainly has to, at whatever level you're engaged in. It's in the coordination of those 3 capacities that you find and experience that there is an experience to be had. And this is all the MMP point of view, and whatever else or wherever else you go beyond that experience, I don't really care, because in embracing it and seeking to perform the choreography, the mat work, because it uniquely reflects the reality that we live in. That's why it is what it is. The mat is the method. You've heard that before, right? So, in the observing. Right there, when you shift or identify spirit as observing, and look at observing within what we know about the physics of the world we live in, makes being a Pilates instructor a high art. Now you all know that already, and you're aware of its expression as it comes out of you artistically, right? But it's not just your interpretation of principles or your view of the ideal, as much as whatever ideal there is in and of itself being clarified by our observing of it. And where I was headed into saying was that observing is this linchpin of understanding about the MMP point of view and the experience that you're after. Observing has to be part of it. And in this exercise that it has a corrective loop to it, That's instantaneous in sensation on the student's part if they're able to discern, right, what the sensation is. And that's your job as an instructor, right? But when you send a person into the cave of their own sensation and help them take a deeper grip of control, more control, there's more to say than I can say about the order of the sequence that isn't synthesized down here in the definition of MMP. So to make a presentation and explain a point of view, actually two identifications, biomechanics of core new tension and one point of view of Pilates that is ideal. And now it seems others with a whole lot of exposure and weave in the history of the culture are feeling pressed out beyond that as well. And the great news is, see, if Pilates is an idea, it defends itself. And to the extent that you understand the idea, it gives you basis for whatever else you make of it. Even if you say this is in direct opposition to the idea, and here's where I teach it, why I teach it that way, okay. The two things from me are core new tension, and core new tension is the means to accomplishing the experience. Well, it's the means. It's part of the means of accomplishing the experience. Core new tension, oppositional rotation between axes. This is in the body. I'm pointing to it. I'm identifying it. And nobody else does and is or wants to think that's such a big deal. And perhaps to a few more generations, and by the time the year 4040 comes, it will be apparent that the body engages itself biomechanically this way. And that's just my point of view. And I'm recording it like putting a note in a bottle for it to be discovered at its own time. So number 6 of my notes is losing touch with observing. Losing touch with observing. So you've heard me describe body, mind, and spirit as being, thinking, and observing. Within the MMP point of view, spirit is observing and takes into consideration all that we know as a species about the characteristics of observing as being part of the experience that we get when we do Pilates. You have to be present. And you can say in spirit, and I don't know what that means. In MMP, spirit is observing, and observing has its own characteristic. It always unnerves me when somebody actually walks down the hall. Losing touch with observing. As an instructor, you want to survive as an instructor, it's not about how much you know. It's not about the knowing. It's about the understanding that there's a coordination of being, thinking, and observing that results in an experience that is unifying, that is making whole, right? Losing touch with observing. so many other influences on the perception of Pilates and the projection of Pilates have to do with overlooking or ignoring or disregarding, or where observing or spirit doesn't play a literal explained role in what you're doing when you teach Pilates or when you try to do Pilates. So understand that, right? Understand that. When it comes to adding 2 and 2, don't need someone to understand what it is you understand in order for you to get paid to explain something that others can't, don't, or won't. And that goes back to number 4. The inconvenient truth for me is that yes, Pilates really does have an essence of its own. And however much you wring dry the education that can be accumulated through tradition and lineage, to whatever extent there is an ideal within what's original, it nourishes everything that comes after, me included. Even the idea included. So the half of monumental, it's monumental to me that in my profession and education and point of view of Pilates, for a few decades it's pretty much been what it is and documented, and to even hear that someone has their own notions or is working on what's ideal to them about Pilates, I take the attitude that, believe me, if anything is ideal, we all end up at the same place. And that comes back to joyriding or not joyriding. And if we come back to the same place insofar as what it is and how it is, meaning what you're doing and how you're doing it, then that becomes the most efficient, expeditious, effective delivery of instruction that you can do. My opinion. Now, I left something behind there, and I wanted to point back to whether or not it's a joyride, and to what extent you want to be efficient and effective. And here is this carousel going around, and I can say that to you that Pilates is the complete coordination of body, mind, and spirit. And that's one time around the carousel. And then next time I say it, you've heard it before and it's familiar. And from there I can either let it go until it happens the 3rd time, or modify from the 3rd time to the 4th time. But you establish familiarity in order to take what's familiar beyond what it already is. Right? That's what we do. My trademark that represents my point of view of Pilates. So this image is my trademark, and I associate that mark with everything else I do, because that's my brand. And my brand of Pilates is MMP. And so this represents MMP. And MMP is just one point of view out of thousands. And it's been unique for a long time and extremely rare in that it looks at whatever is there traditionally and known by the means in which it's been known up till now. And the now being looking at Pilates as a reasoned argument for what's there in and of itself. And in the MMP, there's a theory that there's an ideal within Joe's original work. And in MMP, that ideal is based on Joe's definition, Joe's promise, and Joe's sequence. I call it a promise because I used to focus on the result, that contrology, develops the body uniformly, and that result is a uniformly developed body. That's the promise. But really that's talking about the outcome rather than the moment that you're in, and how what you do is done in the moment that you're in. And contrology develops the body uniformly means that you are in that state of being uniformly engaged, my presumption maybe, but you're after as uniform engagement as you can be in your musculature, because that's the way Joe says contrology develops the body uniformly. So go invent whatever movement you want to, for whatever reason you give, if it at least has a uniform engagement of the body, you're going a long way to representing Pilates. Why is that? Because when you go oppositional rotation between axes, right, it's sensational. So when you establish 2 points of rotation, you create a sensation of alignment between those 2 points. So if the point is here and here, then, and you make core new tension, you make stretch, stretch is necessitated from the engagement. If you're getting a tighter grip here and a tighter grip here, or more easy to actually get to is here to here, you can look in the mirror and see that when you make oppositional rotation between your shoulders and your ears, the distance between the axis of rotation and your shoulders gets further away than from the axis of rotation at your ears. It's not rocket science. It's being aware of how your body uses oppositional rotation between axes to create tension that makes alignment sensational. And in making that grip, in reaching into that grip, is the ideal unification of engagement of your musculature. If you're going to uniformly engage your musculature, you're going to do it through engaging core new tension. That's my opinion. I think it's the fact of the matter. Within my opinion, I think that's the fact. And so when and if you ever get bored or think that Pilates has nowhere to go, I spent my life pointing to its ideal nature, and I see others doing the same. And it's from the illumination that all of us bring to whatever the ideal nature really is, that we honor Joseph Pilates as the creator of the method. His sequence didn't change over the arc of his professional career. By his own documentation, the same sequence in the same order. And within MMP, that's significant in terms of that's where I take my stuff from, is right there, Joe's mat, Joe's book, Joe's order, what Joe says. And a part of the choir just stood up and said, yes, but, and they point to where even the MMP point of view contradicts instructions in Joe's book. And yet, a picture of Joe doing teaser also contradicts Joe's instructions in his book. So I have to go to Facebook and try to face this. So I'm about to make friends with someone that is a long-time Pilates devotee that I've never met personally or had any interaction with or even heard much about from anybody else. But knowing, a long time there, wants to be friends, and in a signature picture, there's tradition staring me in the face. That is an artistic expression compared to the MMP point of view of Pilates would be more scientific and express endpoints that are there to be utilized to get more uniform engagement. Uniform engagement requires oppositional rotation between axes. You don't get anywhere as an instructor without spaced repetition. You can take 3 exercises on a Cadillac and then repeat them 2 more times, and a person leaves feeling so much more empowered than 9 different exercises in whatever order, right? I mean, it's through familiarity that one is better positioned to assume control, because of the anticipation. Let me go back. This observing, right? Observing in my notes about observing. The carousel moves, and then you get to see it repeat. And it's from the repetition that something becomes familiar. And then in being familiar with it, you can anticipate it rather than merely identify it when it comes by. And it's in the anticipation that ties right into doing the mat, and when you're doing one exercise, that the anticipation has, through years of familiarity, developed into a fine transition into what's next. And whether it's dancing with transition, anticipation, and now I have to do something to show that I maintain some kind of stream of control and just don't freeform associate. And in that ending, number 6 was losing touch with observing. And as an instructor, for me, the most important thing is recognizing the nature of spirit as observing. And that lets you, as an instructor, put your student in touch with the universe faster than light. Live can't live forever, but the impression you make on the hologram does. Read between the lines. See behind the curtain. Evaluate points of view. And my half instead of a whole is that I think I'm the first to identify Pilates or explain Pilates as an ideal. And I'm interested to see how anybody else does as well. And it seems there's percolation in that direction. So more than ever, evaluating points of view puts you in a position to add 2 and 2. Establish yourself on Patreon and allow patrons to support you. Support me, Michael Miller Pilates. But really, in the frontier and what I'm looking at, so fascinating and such a vehicle to let you individually reach out and take support from those finding value in what you put out there. Or not, we'll see. But I never announced anything, and when I created an account, a very unexpected person became a patron. And for reasons of wanting to keep this point of view or support this point of view. And right now, the support for me comes in helping support my website. And that's a good reason to become a patron, is to keep that much data on Pilates available to the public. Might go private altogether, I don't know. We'll see. Evaluate perspective. That's add 2 and 2. Direct your thinking. And Geist.